So we are going to be recording today's meeting. Thank you, Sophie. And let me say a few things about what we're going to be doing today. If we go to the next slide. So today's meeting is sort of split up into three chunks. We're going to spend an hour and a half together. The first half hour or so, we're going to have some updates about what's going on with the Climate Action Plan in Vermont, what the initial Climate Action Plan is, what the process is to update it right now. So we're going to have a little bit of background information so that everybody can have some similar information to get into the next section, which is the discussion section. In that, we're going to, because we're kind of a big crowd, I'm watching the numbers here. We're up in the 80s right now of numbers. We're going to split into three groups based on three big topics that are some of the three big topics of this Climate Action Plan. And we'll have an opportunity in those groups to talk about what's important for you all, and a chance to provide some input to the Vermont Climate Council. So we'll spend about 25 minutes doing that with some introduction. And then we'll all come back here in this big plenary space and do a quick debrief about that. And we'll ask some of the Vermont climate counselors who are here and members of the subcommittees to reflect on what they're hearing in those conversations. So that's what we're doing. We'll finish by talking about next steps. All right. And just for those who are just getting woven in right now, we're all here together in one big happy Zoom room. So we're going to have to keep ourselves on mute. You're welcome to put your camera on if you're in a place to do that. And I really want to thank everybody for taking some time today to have this conversation about climate action in Vermont and the update of Vermont's Climate Action Plan. All right. To do this, I'm going to turn it over to two of the 20-something Vermont climate counselors who are going to give you an overview of what's going on and what this all is about. So I'm going to turn this over to Secretary Lindsay Curley and Jared Duvall, who are both members of the Vermont Climate Council. And I think, Secretary Curley, you're going to kick us off here.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I am Lindsay Curley, Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and a member of the Vermont Climate Council. In 2020, the Vermont legislature enacted the Global Warming Solutions Act, a pivotal stride in our state's commitment to combat climate change. This act, which established legally binding emission reduction requirements, stands as a testament to our unwavering dedication to a sustainable future and our resolve to mitigate the effects of global warming. The act was created in response to concerns around Vermont's changing climate and the magnitude of what must be done to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and prepare for the impacts of climate change on Vermont's landscape. The GWSA established a 23-member council, the Vermont Climate Council, and entrusted them with drafting the state's first climate action plan by December 1st of 2021 and updating it every 4 years after that. This diverse council is composed of 8 cabinet members, 7 members appointed by the Senate Committee on Committees, and 8 members appointed by the House of Representatives, ensuring representation of many sectors throughout all regions of our state. The committee's inaugural meeting was February of 2021, and the initial Climate Action Plan was adopted in the same year. The Climate Action Plan is a guide for achieving the objectives and the goals set out in the GWSA and is scheduled for update in 2025. The Vermont Climate Council and its subcommittees are eager to hear from Vermonters about their priorities for the revised plan, and we aim to foster a dynamic process involving Vermonters in shaping our state's response to climate change. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jared Duvall, who's going to take you into some of the details of the goals and objectives.
Thank you, Secretary Curley, and good afternoon, everyone. Really glad to be with you, and thank you for joining. So my name is Jared Duvall. I was appointed to the Vermont Climate Council to provide expertise in energy and data analysis. And on the council, I co-chair the Science and Data Subcommittee, one of the 5 subcommittees of the council, which you can see at the bottom of this slide here. And I also serve on the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee. So as Secretary Curley said, there is an update to our first climate action plan that is due on July 1st of 2025. So we are working backwards from that due date and are looking forward to hearing your input and feedback as we begin the drafting process to update the plan as a council over the coming months, and to hear your feedback not only just now, but throughout the process, including when there is an initial draft of the plan in early of 2025. If we could advance to the next slide. So the objectives of the Global Warming Solutions Act guide the Climate Council's work in terms of what's required in the Climate Action Plan. You see on the left there the 3 targets for emissions reduction, which are a big component of the plan, but not the only important component of the plan. And I would just note that this next update to the plan will really focus on the period from 2025 to 2030. And both of those initial emissions reduction requirement targets follow the public commitments that the United States government has made and represent Vermont doing our part to help meet these science-based targets regarding our responsibility to reduce climate pollution. It is worth pausing to note that the 2030 target is going to require a lot more effort to meet, because not only is the percentage reduction larger, the baseline which it's measured against is a different year. And in 1990, our emissions it was the second lowest recorded level of statewide emissions we've seen in Vermont's history, whereas the 2005 baseline was among the highest. So there's a lot of work ahead of us for us to work together on. And I think it's now time to first mention the other really important objectives of the Solutions Act regarding smart growth and related strategies, achieving long-term sequestration and storage of carbon, beyond 2030, moving towards net zero emissions by 2050 across all sectors, reducing energy burdens for rural and marginalized communities, limiting the use of chemicals, substances, or products that contribute to climate change, and of course, building and encouraging climate adaptation and resilience as we see the effects every day in real time of our destabilized climate. So with that, I think it is time to pass it over to Jane Lazorchak from the Climate Action Office. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, thank you so much, Jared. Jane Lazorchak, I lead the Climate Action Office. And as we transition to the next slide, where I'm going to provide you just a brief overview of what was in the first Climate Action Plan to form the foundation of where we're going and what the update looks like, I just want to really emphasize that the objectives of the Global Warming Solutions Act are nothing short of aspirational, really foundational, really amazing with respect to thinking about climate action as a whole. So often what gets held up is the emissions reductions targets, but the Climate Council and the work of our office in implementing components of the Climate Action Plan really has its work cut out for us, because we understand that while it's imperative that we cut our emissions, we're also thinking about how this plan addresses building resilience and adaptation in our communities and natural and working lands. And it goes beyond thinking also about investing in our natural and working lands for all of the values they provide, including carbon sequestration. So the Climate Council, which hit the ground running in the fall of 2020, really had foundational work to do in setting up what equity would look like in the first Climate Action Plan. And this is an area that we are really fortunate to have done the baseline work and in the first plan, and to be able to look forward now in this future plan about how we operationalize now what are the guiding principles that were being developed and incorporated on a parallel basis to writing the first plan. These 6 principles, which are really encompass all of the way we think about equity through both the development of the plan and the implementation are really important for us to think about, not as one-offs or at any particular one moment in the planning process, but throughout the whole plan. And so we've built systems now with the Climate Council and through the staff and support in the Climate Action Office to operationalize these principles through 4 main components in the update to the Climate Action Plan. We're thinking about engagement with all of you as Vermonters through opportunities like this in the online space, but also through a multi-pronged strategy where we're meeting Vermonters where they are, going out to events that are co-hosted and collaborated on with the Climate Action Office, or just showing up in spaces where we have the opportunity to talk about climate action. We're thinking about how we do strategic focus groups and other public meetings in person, as well as online, to diversify the folks that we're engaging with, and thinking about how we adequately compensate people to provide their feedback with us and pay folks for that participation. That engagement also provides translation services and other ways to make sure more folks can show up and engage with us. We also have the Just Transition Subcommittee of the Climate Council, which developed the guiding principles for the first plan, now embedded in all 5 subcommittees. So it's not about their work over here, but their work is being woven into all of the subcommittees and therefore brought up to the actions and recommendations that feed up to the Climate Council from their birth all the way to their final development, so that we're thinking about how these principles are asking questions and operationalized in the development of the work. Those questions are actually have been developed as a complementary tool with these principles to actually develop and consider at every point in the process as sort of the third way we thought about operationalizing these principles. And subcommittees are guided in thinking about the right times and conversations to have around deploying those questions. And then finally, in the Climate Action Plan, we hope and intend to not only provide individual action consideration around equity, but the overall synthesis of how equitable transition looks like for meeting our climate goals. And that's something we're excited about thinking about as we develop the next plan. So the first Climate Action Plan had 5 key impact areas. So the way that the subcommittees work, you can imagine that many of the subcommittees align directly with the way the first plan was organized, but not always, because sometimes solutions that we know are foundational to implement actions across all areas are needed and are addressed in the area called cross-cutting solutions. So the first plan actually has what organized by pathways, strategies, and actions. So you'll hear that language as we break into breakout groups of what the pathways are, which are really a high-level means to achieving the goals of the Global Warming Solutions Act. They're the what do we need to do? And there are 26 pathways in the first Climate Action Plan. There are 64 strategies, which really looks at how we measure and meet objectives of those pathways. And then Vermont's plan, I would argue, is somewhat unique in the Northeast in that it takes the next level step and actually develops 234 actions, which are really thought of as operational tasks to move this work forward. And all of those add up to thinking about recommendations about how we cut our climate pollution, how we capture and store carbon, build resilience in our natural and working lands, as well as invest in our communities for those benefits. And then as I started off with, the cross-cutting solutions which look at enabling actions that help lift up and support all 4 of those other areas, things like land use planning, workforce development, the passage of an environmental justice law, which we can say has been done since the first Climate Action Plan. Those are really those cross-cutting solutions that we know will help us be successful in all the other areas. So briefly, you can think about how your remarks are framed tonight in the discussion. I just want to provide 3 examples of things that were actual recommendations in the first Climate Action Plan as at the action level, and demonstrate how those have moved forward and been operationalized now in state government. And we have a progress report that we can drop in the chat that actually shows all 234 actions, speaks to the lead implementer, and shows progress from the first Climate Action Plan. to build the space that we're not starting from zero this time, but really looking to how we fill gaps, further prioritize work that was already identified, and then look to really hone new recommendations in areas that we didn't get to the first time. So one of those cross-cutting solutions was the recognition that the Global Warming Solutions Act would really need intergovernmental coordination to both speak to climate action across all of the agencies that are deploying strategies on the ground, to help amplify that work, bring resources and support engagement with Vermonters. And so the Climate Action Plan recommended the development of a Climate Action Office. That Climate Action Office was actually proposed then in the governor's budget a month later after the first Climate Action Plan was adopted in December of 2021. And that budget, discussed and debated in the legislature, was ultimately supported by the legislature, and the Climate Action Office was stood up at the start of what is state fiscal year 23, or July of 2022. So our office is fortunate enough to be almost 2 years old and have the privilege of working closely with the Climate Council to support their work, but also the benefit of being governed by an interagency advisory board and helping to support and speak to climate action happening across many state agencies in Vermont. One of the primary, what I would call high impact areas for emissions reductions, one of only 3 in the first Climate Action Plan, was the development of clean car rules, a suite of 4 rules aimed at cutting and providing cleaner electric vehicles at the top. So the regulation is not on you, the consumer, it's on the OEMs to deliver more clean vehicles to Vermont so that you have the option and purchase when you go to buy vehicles to buy more electric vehicles. Those rules, both on passenger vehicles, which is called Advanced Clean Cars 2, and Advanced Clean Trucks, which has a slower ramp up to electrification, on commercial vehicles and larger trucks. Those were put forward in the initial Climate Action Plan, and rulemaking is one of the sort of powers and backbone of the Climate Action Plan, in that as rules are proposed in the CAP, a clock starts ticking, and the Agency of Natural Resources has a year from the CAP being adopted to adopt those rules. And so those rules were immediately almost presented to ICAR, which is the Interagency Committee on Rulemaking, in the spring of 2022. The State Agency of Natural Resources engaged in significant engagement around the state that summer to really discuss and debate and think about what Vermonters needed to feel successful in the transition to electric vehicles. We brought that forward as part of the public record to the Legislative Committee on Rulemaking, and with their support, we were able to file the rules in December of 2022. Those rules build off decades of similar rulemaking and regulation in Vermont, Advanced Clean Cars 1, as well as new rules, Advanced Clean Trucks. And they won't go actually into effect until model year 2026, which is January of 2025. So they're in place, and we're thinking about what the supporting systems are needed to have Vermonters feel supported when they look to buy an electric vehicle. And then finally, just to round out the picture of what the Climate Action Plan is able to put forward and consider for recommendations, there was also a recommendation in the capturing carbon section, one of those 5 impact areas, around changes to what is our current use program or use value appraisal, which looks at how undeveloped land that Vermonters own is taxed at its current development. I should say it's the fact that it's not developed, so you get a lower tax burden. Those lands are managed under forest management plans. And so with the added value of thinking about diversity of forest management options and providing for old forest conditions that typically store more carbon, there were changes recommended in the Climate Action Plan to allow old forests to be covered in that program and still receive the same tax benefit. That was put forward and collaborated on with the legislature by Forest Parks and Recreation and the tax department in the legislative session of 2022. That came forward as Act 146, signed into law, and is currently being implemented in our agency through the Forest Parks and Recs Division. So hopefully those 3 actions give you an example of the power of recommendations in the Climate Action Plan as really setting a stage for a guidepost for government and the legislature to collaboratively work together to advance climate action in many areas. I'll turn it over now to Melissa Bailey, who's the director of the Energy Office in the Public Service Department, to guide us through what the subcommittees are currently working on.
Thanks, Jane. Good afternoon, everybody. Melissa Bailey. I'm the co-chair of the Cross-Sector Mitigation Subcommittee of the Climate Council. And as Councilors Duvall and Curley laid out, the objectives and the work required of the Vermont Climate Council are laid out in the Global Warming Solutions Act, and much of that work is carried out through topical subcommittees. And so using the initial climate action plan as a strong foundation, the subcommittees have begun their work identifying significant gaps in our programs and policies that will be necessary to meet those Global Warming Solutions Act requirements. So subcommittees began this spring by reviewing the status of recommendations from the initial climate action plan. A link to that tracking document, I think, is in the meeting chat right now. Essentially, we're looking at how are we doing in making progress towards those global warming solutions requirements, where is progress lagging, and where should priority areas of focus be in updating the climate action plan. We have roughly 1 year until the next iteration of the climate action plan will be completed. And so the subcommittees are trying to stay focused on areas of the biggest impact in conducting this work. So the second stage of subcommittee work will be completed over the summer. And that is to generate potential recommendations to fill gaps in our programs and policies. In generating those recommendations, there is a specific focus on equity and impacts of climate action plan recommendations on disadvantaged communities. So subcommittees will be recommending supporting or complementary policies to mitigate any potential negative impacts to vulnerable populations as they generate these recommendations. And then throughout the fall, subcommittees will work on refinement and prioritization to present to the full Climate Council. As noted on the slide, engagement, it's not noted on the slide, but engagement will be conducted all throughout the process. And this kickoff meeting is part of that effort. Subcommittees will also be generating questions to pose to the public during the ongoing public engagement outreach that the Climate Action Office is conducting that Jane referenced. So moving on, this next slide number here shows the criteria through which the potential recommendations will be prioritized in the fall. So looking not just at climate mitigation, emissions reductions, but also equity, other benefits of potential policies, cost effectiveness, and technical feasibility. And as this slide notes, engagement will happen all along the way. And so now we'd really like to get started with the subcommittee discussions and hear from all of you. So I'm going to turn it back over to David to explain the structure of the topical breakout sessions.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you all for those initial presentations. If they felt sort of fast, it's because we're trying to create space for all of you to have a chance to provide some input. As I mentioned at the top, we're going to do that by splitting into some groups and topically into 3 groups. And let me just check and see if the slide, yes, the slide is there. So you can see those 3 topical groups that we're going to be working on. And when we do this, you have the ability to choose with your own feet or your own click of the mouse button which group you'd be most interested to go spend 20, 25 minutes having a conversation about. Okay. Jane gave an overlook of just 3 of the, I always get the number wrong, Jane. Is it 300 and something actions that are in the initial climate action plan?
Just a mere 234.
234 actions. There's a lot in there. In the subcommittees right now are in the process of saying, okay, there was a lot in there. Given what's happened over the last 3 years, are there any gaps that we need to address? And can we be better perhaps this time at lifting up the things that we really want to catch people's attention with? So a prioritization. So subcommittee co-chairs are going to say just 3 minutes worth of introduction about what those subcommittees have been working on and what their plan is over the summer and into the fall. And then we're going to have a chance to talk with those of you who want to in the room to say, really what's going to be important for you. What would you most want to see addressed, the gaps that you see, et cetera. So we'll be doing that now. A couple of things I want to say before we go into that. This is a public meeting, publicly noticed. All are welcome to be here. And that just means we're going to need to show good meeting etiquette of acting in a way that's respectful of other folks, show folks the respect you'd like them to show you, it's very likely we're going to have different views on some of these issues, and that's fine. And so let's have a good conversation about that. We'll be coming back here in plenary afterwards, and I'll ask the counselors and subcommittee members about what they've been hearing in those conversations. One last thing, if you are a counselor, a member of the Vermont Climate Council, or a member of the subcommittee, you can go ahead and rename yourself on Zoom. You'll see that some folks here will say after their name counselor or things like that. That would be a good thing to do if you haven't done that already, so that you can identify yourself on Zoom as a member of the council or a member of one of the subcommittees. Okay, I think that's all that I wanted to do. One last thing, my colleague Charlotte Goodman is here, and she's going to be the one who helps you find your way into a breakout room if you're having a hard time doing it on your own. So Charlotte can be helpful if you're having a hard time figuring out how to get yourself into one of those breakouts. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll come back here. Charlotte, why don't we come back here at, what time is it? At 1:30.
1:30.
Make sure we're back here at 1:30. All right. And Sophie, if you want to go ahead and open up those breakout rooms if you haven't already, and we will see you there. So go ahead down at the bottom of your screen. There should be an opportunity to click on something that says breakout rooms, and then pick the one you want to go to. I'll see you over there. I got to go facilitate one, so I got to jump, but Charlotte's going to be back here if you have any questions about how to get into one of these breakout rooms. We'll see you there. Have a good conversation.
Hey, David, do we get automatically put them on?
No, you need to choose that. And for whatever reason, it's not letting me go in. So can you go into your breakout rooms and choose ag and ecosystems? If you're having a hard time, Charlotte can send you to that.
I'm not seeing that opportunity. I'm seeing just a box with everybody's names being placed in rooms.
I'm not seeing the opportunity either to
Okay.
join a breakout room.
I'm not either.
Gotta click on more. It's at the bottom right. And it will
Oh, got it.
Yes. And if you need me to move you to one, just let me know. I can do it on my end.
Oh, I see then.
Hey, everybody, we're all going to get pulled back. Let's give it just a moment, get everyone back in. It is often the case that folks are mid-sentence when that happens. So I apologize if someone was literally in a sentence as you got pulled back into the main room here. But I was in the ag and ecosystems breakout. It was a really good conversation. I hope in the other breakouts we had that. Thanks, Jane. So what we wanted to do now is just take a moment to hear from what the different conversations, hear what they focused on. And the way we're going to do that, at least as a first way, is to ask some of the counselors and the subcommittee members or co-chairs that were in those rooms to reflect on some of the key ideas that they heard in that conversation. So let's do that first. And then assuming we have some time, we could even take some hands from other folks in the room. But let's start by seeing what the counselors heard and what the subcommittee members heard in those conversations. And so I wonder if we might want to start over in that oddly named one, the cross-sector mitigation, which is all about how you reduce emissions in different sectors of the economy. And I think over there we had Melissa was there in particular, and perhaps some other members. Melissa, do you want to say a word about what you heard in that conversation?
Sure. Thanks, David. We had great conversation, and also Eric Schultz from Cross Sector was in there as well. So I'll turn it to him in just a second, but really robust conversation, kind of a wide range of topics were covered. I'd say what stood out for me was there was, folks really highlighted the need for not just more money, not just more incentives for Vermonters to make climate-friendly choices, but this need for supporting policies specifically around workforce, around education and energy coaching and navigators to provide kind of high-touch services to people to help them sort through their energy choices. And it's not surprising to me. We have a myriad of energy-related programs in Vermont. It's a complex landscape, but again, I was a little bit surprised that what came through was not just give us more EV incentives or people need more weatherization incentives. It was really around how do we have this structure that supports a change in culture in Vermont and gets us all moving in the same direction together. So I think, yeah.
Fascinating. That sounds interesting. Eric, do you want to add things that you heard? Sorry to put you on.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. Good afternoon, everyone. A lot of talk, and I heard the word navigator come up several times. And so I think that that's what I do primarily. I work with low-income communities in a program called Green Saving Smart, which is a pilot program that's actually sunsetting now. So we're in our final months, unfortunately, as the timing with the IRA incentives starting to come online. But I think that the need for kind of hand-holding, for navigators for the low income folks, for the moderate income folks, and for everyone. That's kind of what I heard, that everybody kind of regardless of their income level, these needs are out there. So I think that moving forward, having coaches and navigators, I don't know what the future holds for my program. There are we're looking at extending and kind of a 2.0 Green Saving Smart. I don't know quite what that looks like, but the needs out there. We didn't touch a lot on transportation, which I thought we would talk more about. I did really appreciate the light rail comment that we got cut off at the end. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
That's great. Melissa, anything else you want to add before I dive in another group?
No, I think we should, yeah, I think that covers it for cross sector.
Okay, super. Our folks over, I saw Billy just came off mic. Billy, do you want to talk a little bit about what you heard in Ag and Eco? And we had Jael there as well, another co-chair. But Billy, you want to kick us off? Like, what did we hear over in the agriculture and ecosystem conversation?
Sure. Yeah, we had a lot of great comments and conversation. At a high level, we discussed that while reducing carbon emissions is obviously critical, that the climate picture is much broader than that. And for purposes of adaptation and resilience, they're equally important, if not more so in Vermont. We really need to think about how we maintain Vermont's forest and natural systems and all the climate benefits that they provide, including cooling and biodiversity and opportunities for wildlife to move and stay connected. We talked about the challenges and opportunities with balancing the need for agriculture and food security, renewable energy generation, and biodiversity and ecological systems, all in a relatively small state with a lot of competing pressures on each acre. We talked about ensuring that there is equity in our process and decision making, and more broadly in the land use and regulatory decisions that are made in the state, that as these decisions become more weighty, that we have to make sure that folks have the opportunity to participate. And I'm sure we talked about a lot more, so I would ask Jael or Brian if they have any other observations.
Jael, anything on your end that you'd want to highlight of things that you heard that Billy didn't touch?
There's a lot about you looking at nature-based solutions to help cool the planet and to address climate crisis, and then engaging communities in the decision-making process in terms of how land is managed and developed or preserved.
Thanks, Jael. Great. And a few things came up more about renewable energy that may be applicable, or hydrogen that may be applicable to the cross-sector folks, so we can send those notes that way. The third group Rural Resilience Adaptation. We have your co-chairs there. We've got David. I think Andrea's there too. Andrea, David, what did you hear in your group?
I'll invite Marianne and Indra and David also to provide what they heard, but I heard a lot about community support and that being a focus that needs to be emphasized. Definitely looking at the differences between rural and more developed areas. Talked a lot about ways to keep people aware of the process and engaged in that. How we communicate, because there is so much information, it can be overwhelming. People can be turned off by that. So really trying to be simple in the way that we communicate and, using infographics and more plain language, focusing on vulnerable populations and communities, those that are most vulnerable. And really thinking about how we talk to people and described the effect of the actions that we're putting forward on them and their communities. And so looking also at the way we help plan, help communities plan, and what that means, where they are with their planning, and what more they might need to focus and have better effect. And then we talked a little bit about energy resilience too.
Great. Okay. David, anything else on your end?
No, it's just
Good summary? Okay, great. All right, so you heard just a brief summary of some of the highlights that the subcommittee co-chairs are taking away from this, in addition to the detailed notes that we took in each of those sessions. I've been seeing some activity in the chat, which has been helpful. I do want to create a space before we talk about next steps and where this is all going and other ways that Vermont is going to be engaging communities and others. But before we do that, if folks have something that they'd love to share in the plenary, we can have a moment here, the next 5-10 minutes, just doing a quick around if there's any final things you didn't get a chance to say in those smaller groups, or maybe you didn't hear it summarized well by the co-chairs. So again, folks can raise their hand here if they'd like to chime in, and we just take a few minutes to do this. John?
Yeah, I did run out of time. Thank you. I guess my final comment would have been in the breakout group that we need to place community interests over developer interests. That communities need to have say over where things are built and how things are built and how things are owned. The Inflation Reduction Act, and this was spoken very little about at the legislature this year, unfortunately, did come up, but it got very short shrift as compared to the predominant conversation on funding energy development, renewable energy development. And that is the IRA actually provides an alternative to tax write-offs for private industry, grants to municipalities. So in lieu of a private outside interest, developing a project where they see it best fits their needs, a community, an alternative, could build a like-size project where it best fits the community, what the community says it needs and where it should be placed. And it would be funded substantially under the IRA. So I think folks need to put that and keep that on their radar and in terms of developing policy going forward, pursue those grants to allow municipalities to be on equal footing with development interests. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate the comment. Other things that didn't get said yet that would be important to raise up before we talk about next steps? I'll notice in the chat, thanks Sophia, saying that we didn't talk a ton about transportation, but a lot to do there. And thanks for that comment. Anything else folks want to lift up before we switch gears to next steps? Annette?
Yes, I have a sort of overriding concern that is about costs. And
to date, the Climate Council has made recommendations that have been adopted by the legislature that look to me to be raising costs for Vermonters. And so as part of looking at updating the plan, I would hope that you would add a section in it looking back at the potential costs of what has been recommended to date and provide some cost analyses for any future recommendations. I really think that is a piece that should not be lost, as so many of us are struggling day to day to pay bills, which are skyrocketing. I'm paying a lot more for everything that I am doing on a regular basis than I ever have before. And so with the California emissions rule, with the renewable energy standard, with the clean heat standard, doing an evaluation of what has been adopted and recommended and adopted by the legislature as it relates to the cost to Vermonters, and then anything that you're doing, adding in an assessment of potential costs, I think would be very valuable in helping to inform future policies. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. That's really helpful. And if you remember, there was in that slide, just before we broke, one in that pie chart of the priorities, one of them is cost effectiveness. And so it really raises the bar to think about how costs are addressed in this new version of the plan. Margaret?
Hi, excuse me. Thanks for letting me be part of this conversation as a non-climate person, but I work at the Charlotte Library and we are part of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, and there is a working group here in Vermont of libraries, and I think I'm just sort of making a pitch for a place to share information and resources about all of this stuff that's happening.
I am so glad you said that, Margaret. And it's one of the things we want to talk about in next steps. And Jane mentioned it earlier, like the range of activities that are happening, and to think about libraries as a asset in that and a place to do that kind of outreach sounds really exciting. Henry?
Yeah, just a comment on costs. I think when we look at costs, we also must include the costs of the climate damage that we've been doing if we ignore that side of the ledger sheet.
Yeah. Thanks, Henry. Yep. It cuts both ways. All right. I'm not seeing other hands. If you're having a hard time finding the hand, just drop in the chat. Bill.
Thanks, Dave. One more comment. I just think it's generally important to look at and examine the potential for building renewable energy within existing buildings and infrastructure to lessen the potential conversion of natural and ag lands that are providing really important facets of climate resilience, and also the BLM, or Bureau of Land Management's Western Solar Plan. There's been a really interesting analysis comparing, 700,000 acres of renewable energy on public lands versus what it would look like to have a similar output of renewable energy on built infrastructure. Can't remember the specific statistics, but it's probably something for all of us to look into.
Thanks, Bill. And I saw you drop that in the chat as well. Thanks so much. And I think that feeds into the land use conversations that JL mentioned and others, and trying to understand those competing interests and how to make wise choices. Okay. Why don't we do this? We have a slide or two about next steps and how to stay involved. And I was going to say another word or two about the types of engagement in addition to what's on that slide. But let me turn the slide over to Kelly Klein, another counselor. And Kelly, you can walk us through some of these opportunities to stay engaged going forward.
Yes, thank you. Happy to. Yeah, so Kelly Klein, I'm a council member. I'm a representative of small businesses. And there's some really cool ways to stay involved, and really excited to be working with a bunch of different people on this. So you can always visit climatechange.vermont.gov/get-involved, and that's a way to find all the things that are happening. There will be more things coming on as we have new events and new things like that. There are ways that you can get in touch with us there as well. You can sign up for our e-newsletter to just stay in the loop and get informed about what we're doing. Let's see, because I think someone's gonna drop this in the chat, right? Sophie?
Yeah.
So there will be, and we'll send those links in the follow-up email. So there's a great way to stay involved and just stay in the loop. And we also have some social media links that you can follow us on social media, find out more about what we're up to. All of our subcommittee meetings and all of our council meetings are open to the public. And so check out the calendar, climatechange.vermont.gov/calendar, and find if there's a subcommittee meeting that, especially if you attended a breakout group and you're excited to learn more, attend a meeting. They're public. There's always a portion for public comment in those meetings. And it's a great way to learn more about what we're working on and get involved. And then the full climate council meetings are also public, and you can engage in those. And if you missed one, you can always go watch the video. They're all recorded. So you can go back and watch a video, find a section of it if there's something that you particularly wanted to see on the agenda and didn't have a chance to make it. So we also have a survey, which we're hoping people will fill out by July 1st. And that's in the chat. That will be sent in the follow-up email. And please share that with your networks, people who might also be interested in weighing in. And that's just another way to help make sure that we're on the right track. We're serving all Vermonters. There's also a comment portal, which will be open continuously throughout this process. And so you can submit written comments that way. And then if you want it to be directed to a particular subcommittee or to the full climate council, you can indicate that there too, which is really helpful for us to know that we make sure we send it to the right people. And then there's an option to call. So you can call if you prefer to call and speak your message rather than write it. The number is 802-404-2729, and you can leave a voicemail there. And you can, again, say in that message if there's anyone particularly want us to make sure that that's sent to. There's also a bunch of outreach and engagement that's happening, not just this, but people from subcommittees, the Climate Council, Climate Action Office, and we have this wonderful contract with Consensus Building Institute where we have people on the ground going out to the communities and meeting with people. So folks will be at, let's see, there's a free laundry day at King Street Laundry in Burlington that folks will be there. And there's people will be at the Indigenous Peoples Day Rocks event at Stowe Town Hall. Let's see what else. Bennington this weekend for Summer Jam Family Fest. There's the Springfield Pride event at Rainbow Palooza next weekend. So if you know of any really great events that we should be attending with our community outreach group, please let us know, because that's how we get the word out there. And I love that comment about libraries, because I think libraries are a really, really great asset and resource. So if I miss anything, David, Jane, let me know. But those are some really great ways to stay involved.
Thanks, Kelly. No, that was perfect. And just picking up on all that sort of outreach and engagement work that's going on the ground. There's quarterly sort of summaries of all that work that's happened. And I'll just drop an example of that, which is sort of the first 3 months of this year in the chat. You can see the kinds of activities that happened. We were very focused in those first 3 months of the year doing some small group conversations with Vermonters who speak different languages and would struggle to perhaps get involved in a meeting like this. And we'll be doing a range of other types of engagement. And so signing up for the newsletter is the best way to get that kind of information too, because it will be included in those newsletters from the Climate Action Office. So there's a lot going on, and folks on this call, Indra, who some of you met as a facilitator in one of the groups, Kashka, who's put a couple things in the chat. Those are all folks who are deeply involved in the on-the-ground work, talking to a range of Vermonters, and we're trying to capture that, and all that gets pushed to the subcommittees and the council to help shape the thinking that goes into this update. Okay. I think that's what we were going to do today. Let me just check, counselors or Jane, anything else you'd want to share before we finish up today? Secretary Curley, and anything on your end you'd like to offer before we finish up?
No, this was wonderful. I really appreciate everybody's participation.
Super. Thanks so much. Jane, anything on your side?
No, this was great. Really look forward to future opportunities to speak with you all about the upcoming plan.
And please do be in touch if you have ideas about how the community engagement team can be out and about, activities to attend, as like Kelly said, let us know. Thoughts on how to do that, let us know. And then the substantive input that we've heard. I saw in the chat some questions about when subcommittees or counselors will have in-person meetings. Those will likely happen, most likely in the fall. My guess is they'll be mostly virtual over the summer. So stay tuned, and all that gets posted online so you can see whether it's going to be a Zoom event or an in-person meeting. Okay. Great. I think that's it, folks. So have a great rest of your day. Sorry about all this heat, but the climate is indeed a-changing. So have a heat safety plan if you don't have one already in your community. And we look forward to seeing you in future meetings and staying in touch. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.